In Chapter 7, we're talking about students, student characteristics, students and their environment, family, social class background, parenting styles, and so on, as well as reasons why students drop out and how students interact in the informal system of school. Now, the informal system of school looks at things like peer groups, students' self-concept, teachers' expectations, and how much students feel like they can meet those expectations, and so on and so forth. We're going to cover more about the informal system in Chapter 8, but Chapter 7 gives us an introduction to the informal system, so be sure you're up to speed on that. The rest of the chapter focuses on the formal system of school for students. What is it like to be a student? What's the student's role? And pay attention to the stories that you'll read in this chapter that come out through the research. It's all pretty interesting stuff. Some of the stories will sound familiar to you, while others, depending on your age or your race or your gender or a whole bunch of other things, might seem very different. A couple of things to note. This chapter mentions a 1983 report called A Nation at Risk. This was a huge deal in its time, and that report remains central to a lot of curriculum decisions even to this day. A Nation at Risk was a landmark report when it was released because it was one of the first modern reports to say that American schools aren't doing very well and American students aren't learning what they need to know. It compared the U.S. to other nations around the world, especially Asian nations where we were losing our economic competitive edge. The logic was, if we're losing our ability to compete in the global economy, it must be because our schools are turning out students who are less and less able to do the work we need. Now, the reason why America has lost some of its competitive edge in the global economy is much more complex than just what kids know when they graduate from high school. Nonetheless, it's an important theme in education because if our students can't read, write, or do simple math by the time they graduate, there isn't much that they're going to contribute to our economy, period. So, A Nation at Risk put together recommendations for what should be studied, i.e. content, how much of these subjects they should study, what teachers need to know to teach it to their students, etc. If you've ever wondered why you start learning math in first grade and keep taking it all the way through high school, you have A Nation at Risk to thank for that. Because that was the first time a report said, our students are so far behind in math compared to the rest of the world that they need to be studying it in every grade from 1st through 12th. Same goes for why you get 4 years of English and language arts in high school, 3 years of science, 3 years of social studies, and so on. States and local districts can add their own requirements, of course, but A Nation at Risk was the first time we saw the federal government getting into the game of trying to standardize what kids know and how much of it they know. By the way, if you're interested in reading or skimming through A Nation at Risk, I've posted a link to it on the introductory page here. Other things to pay attention to in this chapter. Pay attention to student roles and how they are defined. There's a lot of material on both formal groupings of students and informal groupings, i.e. peer groups and cliques. And what students learn is largely based on what their friends around them are learning. Also, there's a lot about student failures and dropouts in this chapter. Take a look at Table 7.1, which shows dropout rates and compares them across race, class, and gender. You'll be amazed to see how much of an effect there is of coming from a low-income background on dropping out, more so than racial background or sex or gender. Then look at Table 7.2, which shows the reasons students give for dropping out. Some interesting statistics there, too. So that's my overview for this week. A lot to take in, but it's pretty interesting, so I hope you get into it. Remember, there's a quiz and a discussion forum this week, so be sure to take care of those, and I'll see you online.